Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored with Steve Taplin. Welcome to Software Leaders Uncensored, where tech leaders drop the filters and just tell it like it is. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, a serial technology entrepreneur who's launched 30 companies, failed at 20 of those, but scaled 10 of those to success. And I turned that roller coaster of a ride into my book called Fail Hard, Win Big. And this is where I teach people how to turn failure in your biggest competitive advantage and how custom software played a defining role in every win. Now I'm the CEO of Sonatify Technology. We are a software engineering firm with resources in both the US and Latin America, helping existing software development teams grow and scale. And today I am joined by Olly Downs, who is the Chief Technology and AI Officer of a company called Curinos. Olly has been a serial technology innovator in AI, machine learning, quantum computing. So this is going to be fun out of the Seattle area. Olly, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Olly, if you would, take a few minutes and walk our listeners through the journey of your career.
Golly, I started my career as a physicist, where in physics they were taking early machine learning techniques for radio astronomy. And I gravitated to that group and worked with one of the Bayesian machine learning pioneers, David Mackay. It was viewed as unacceptable physics and unpopular physics, which just won the Nobel Prize in 2024 for my PhD advisor, John Hopfield.
Wow.
I worked with him at Princeton. I joined the beginnings of the AI and machine learning group at Microsoft Research in the late 90s. Got to spin out their first IP Ventures startup in the early 2000s, which is a traffic and navigation company globally called INRIX. I got addicted to the fact that you can use interesting math and science and to build software or enable software that drives a whole business opportunity. I've had 9 startup companies in one way or another. And my last startup company, Amplero, was acquired by the predecessor to Curinos.
Excellent. So you took a different path as a scientist, as a physics expert, and took that into AI technology and took the overlying similarities. That's pretty fascinating.
I'm probably one of the few chief technology and AI officers with a PhD in AI.
That's fantastic. And so tell us about your company, Curinos.
We're a financial technology and data company. We enable actionable decision intelligence for banks and other financial institutions. We have a unique set of data assets, most of which are provided first party by our financial institution partners. It allows us to perform comparative and industry analytics, as well as inform macro and individual level dynamic decision making.
Fantastic. And so you landed this role, your previous company was acquired. So that's how you grew into this role?
Yes, okay. Very much so.
That's one way to do it, to say the least. Tell us about some fun projects you're working on.
Well, we're working very hard on the next wave of growth for Curinos. And that means synthesizing our current product portfolio, which started across 4 different physical infrastructures and 5 tech stacks. So putting that together, part of it is, a very large part of it is creating a unified data asset built around bank and financial institution customers, whether those customers are consumers, small businesses, or large enterprises, and really taking a full balance sheet view of those customers to enable a comprehensive understanding of customer value and the opportunities banks have to grow the value in the relationships with their customers.
Gotcha. That's definitely a large project, to say the least.
Yeah, I would say one of the interesting areas we're working on right now involves applying AI to scale up our ability to collect, clean, and manage data internally. Today, we have some large teams that really work on data that gets sent to us in almost arbitrary forms. We have over 1,200 bank customers in the US alone, and many of them are small community banks or credit unions. So they send us data in arbitrary ways, flat files and random text or screen scrape captures and all sorts of things. And so we do a lot of work extracting and standardizing that data. And of course, we have human in the loop for for quality assurance, one of the things I've loved about a career in AI and machine learning has been actually this interface between people and the machines, and where the best tech for the job is actually a person, but using the person in a very efficient way to really capture mistakes and edit and review and improve quality. So really enjoying working in that area at the moment.
So, talk about using AI in a regulated industry and getting beyond the fear that both the fear and the hype that's kind of going on out there around that.
It's really funny because while banking is such a highly regulated industry, it's been analytical since forever. One of the,
True.
analytics at the core industries. And so what we've done as Curinos is really approach the AI space and innovation with AI grounded in three tenets. One is the biggest problem that's been solved by generative AI capabilities. So to think about this current wave of AI, it is language and concept understanding. And so we've been focusing on using AI to externally in our software itself to improve the accessibility of our analytics products and our rich analytics methodologies to more business oriented and less technical user personas. So
Okay.
focus very much on improving access and understanding and flexibility of our software solutions. And secondly, because the banking space is sort of grounded in risk management and regulation, but also a history of rich analytics, there are good processes in place for proving and auditing and managing the risk of underlying analytics methodologies and models. And we've grounded our AI features and functionalities in leveraging as services or agent-based services, those same mathematical methodologies and models, rather than having the AI perform the analytics itself. And then
Okay.
thirdly, because all of our customers are financial institutions, we've built with compliance in mind from scratch with our solutions. And particularly, as I talked about, that sort of human in the loop part of the process where we make things, I would say, glass box rather than black box. You can look in, you can audit. There are important key checkpoints in business processes and workflows, and there are natural points where you can ensure compliance.
Awesome. Well, tell us, let's dive into your software engineering team and how many engineers do you have? Where are they located? Talk about your approaches to managing them.
We have about 150 engineers, broadly spoken, in our organization, spanning both sort of core, full stack, back end, and front end software engineering, data engineering, machine learning engineering, and operations and data science. And so we're located broadly with FTEs in the US, Canada, and the UK, and we have nearshore outsourcing in Latin and South America.
Awesome. Now, with your core team, what kind of work model do you have? Are you in office, remote, hybrid?
We work in a hybrid modality for those who are located close to our three major offices, or four major offices, I would say, in New York, where we're headquartered, Chicago, Toronto, and London. We have a hybrid methodology, and then about a third of our FTE team is fully remote, including me, actually. We work in a agile mode, but we sort of have a mixture of a Spotify squads and chapters model, and sort of a more pods only model. We have a few areas of where we have common disciplines, data science and machine learning, and our UI UX competency in particular, where we treat them as chapters. But we have embedded data scientists, we have embedded UI UX practitioners in each pod, so each pod can be fully functioning and autonomous.
I personally believe that's the way to go and how to get team unity.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we've taken that model with our staffing in general. It doesn't matter whether you're an FTE or a contractor. Everyone is time aligned from a sprint ceremonies and pod ceremonies perspective. And so everyone is an active participant in the team. There's no sort of over the walling to contractors. They're just an integral part of our teams.
Awesome. So, as a tech leader, we're in Q4 2025.
Yes.
What are some of the biggest challenges you're facing right now?
Well, we've been working hard to land on our objectives around cloud costs and make sure we're managing them actively and well. We've done a lot of significant work on managing security vulnerabilities and risk, and enforcing some approaches where we don't get behind on packages and maintenance and those sorts of things. We've worked hard to drive sprint predictability up across our entire organization. We've increased it about 15% year on year at this point, which has been very satisfying to see. But the whole thing has really been about focusing on driving innovation, building out, like I said, our core data asset, consolidating our current products and platforms, and setting ourselves up for actionable decision intelligence powered by AI and machine learning capabilities in our new product portfolio.
So in the being in the finance, the banking and finance sector, are you seeing cases where it's making sense to not have things in the cloud and have a more on-prem or in your own data centers? Now, you guys are a service provider for financial institutions, but I'd love to get your take on it.
Honestly, I think we've found that, if you want to do sophisticated things with data at scale, particularly if that involves AI and machine learning, you need the burstable, scalable compute that the cloud can offer you. I think you can pretend that you have better security and regulatory control in a self-managed data center environment, but I think the reality is not really that. And these trade-offs of scale really push you to the cloud, and particularly in the last 2-3 years, I think the flexibility, particularly of data technologies as it relates to different security and permissioning models, has really got quite rich with what you can do with Databricks or with Google BigQuery, or Azure SQL. I think it's become really intentional how you manage security and permissioning with data. And so I don't view the cloud versus not the cloud as a benefit these days. I view having a hybrid infrastructure as quite a challenge, because you sort of have to have duplicative teams managing two different types of infrastructure. And so we've really worked hard to try and get away from that as much as possible. In certain segments of banking, it would have been kind of a hard no, except for some of the real innovators like USAA or Capital One. Capital One, really the first cloud first pioneer in the space. But I think it's coming to us, I would say, really interesting, but more on the AI side. But our own sort of research with customers a year ago, they were all saying none of them were using AI in their day-to-day roles among banking executives. And a year on, almost 100% are using AI in some way, at least of the groups that we surveyed and have been working with. And so that has been a step function change in an industry that I think we all sort of perceive as being very much a laggard in terms of overall technology adoption. So I think there's a real revolution passing through the industry.
It's definitely not boring times. It's definitely interesting times, to say the least.
Yeah.
Olly, so you've been doing this quite a while. You have your PhD in AI. What are some brutal lessons you know now that you wish you would have learned earlier in your career?
Early in my career, I was just so fascinated by the technology. And now late in my career, I've realized it doesn't matter how great the technology is if you can't have the impact on the segment or vertical or on the businesses that you're trying to insert that technology into. If they're not ready to adopt it, if they can't understand it, if it doesn't meet their needs where they are or fit into their business or process or workflows, it doesn't matter how cool the underlying tech is. So impact over innovation, oddly, or good innovation has great impact, might be the thing to say.
Very good point. Very good point. All right, so let's dive into some more AI specific stuff relative to the industry, relative to your sector. So MIT did a report in Q3 of 2025, basically saying that 95% of generative AI pilots at companies are failing. Their definition of failing was zero or negative ROI. And one of the biggest problems they stated is they'll get 90% there, but they can't get that last 10%. Love to hear your perspective on this.
It's really interesting. I do quite a lot of advisory work and the A side of machine learning and AI companies too. And I've seen a lot of solutions that have treated AI as the hammer and everything is a nail. And it's very easy to, particularly in a conversational analytics or chatbot scenario, to engineer your way in quite a constrained domain to, well, I actually need prompting that's full of rules. And it's like, well, if you need lots of rules, you probably should implement a rules engine, because you don't really want rules that are stochastically honored. You want rules that are deterministically honored, within which, there's then a bounding box within which you expect some exploratory insight to be created by AI or unique synthesis of data. And so I think it's very common in multiple waves of technology. I've gone gray over what I would consider to be 3 of the 4 waves of AI over the last 3 or 4 decades. It's really all about using the technology for what it's great at and the real problem set that it solves. I mentioned earlier, I really think the revolution with large language models and generative AI has been reproducing the human understanding of language and concepts like language, objects that you see, syntax that we might have that's not human language, but it's technical language. These all have the same sort of structures to them. We've solved this idea of understanding the relationships and recognizing concepts with computer science. And you can really, really leverage that. But if you're leveraging it to enforce rules or structure that's solid, it's the wrong representational framework.
How would you coach those CIOs or CTOs who were part of the study that MIT conducted where implementing AI in their organization was a complete failure?
Here's the question to ask, which is, if you didn't have the problem before you knew about AI, you shouldn't be working on it now. The fact that enabling technology became available should just be decreasing the cost or effort to solve the problem in a way that meets the user need. But if the user need didn't exist before and you weren't trying to solve it in a way, or you hadn't tried to solve it before, but you found it was unfeasible or too costly, it probably isn't a meaningful problem to be solving. So you can't lose track of what's the value of solving the problem and then deciding what the enabling technology is for it, rather than the other way around. It's like, oh, we've got to rush to make sure we're doing something with generative AI. No, don't do that. You should be rushing to solve some really impactful business problems. And if AI enables you to solve some of them that you couldn't previously when you've investigated them before, then dive all the way in.
I've had a lot of CTOs on this show, as your episode 129. It's definitely a challenge. Now, the past 18, 24 months in the software engineering space as it relates to AI has been wild and crazy, from you don't need software engineers anymore to AI should be in everything. It's been quite a juggling act for CTOs to educate their non-technical executives, their board, their investors who don't understand it, of what it really is and isn't. Have you run across this?
I'll tell you about a cheeky moment and perspective. So, the CEO of McKinsey announced that McKinsey was using 12,000 AI agents. And this rippled through leadership conversations I was in and board conversations I was in. And I sort of kept a bit quiet. And then I turned to our chief people officer, Nikki. She's awesome. And I said, hey, Nikki, if you've got 12,000 people in an organization, how many problems do you have on a monthly basis with those people? She's like, well, we have a lot. And I'm like, well, how many people do you need to manage those? Well, we need quite a large people team, probably several hundred people in the people team of a 12,000 person organization. I'm like, well, if I think about these 12,000 agents, most of them were written by fresh out of college McKinsey analysts. How many of them do you think have a problem? And how many people do you think are actually looking to see whether those agents have a problem or not? If I was McKinsey's CEO, I would be laying out for you the 3 to 5 really impactful ways we're using generative AI to shape corporate strategy and how we think about corporate strategy and the value of leveraging AI in those spaces. The volume doesn't matter. The volume just means you got a large volume of problems as well. I'd be talking about the value.
I think people think it's sexy when they could say, I have tens of thousands of agents, but I love how you put that. If you had the same amount of employees, how many problems would you have? And
Yeah,
so that
but
is a good way of looking at it.
I got an army of 12,000 autonomous robots marching towards you. How do you feel about that?
So as it relates to software engineers on your team, and when you're onboarding engineers and interviewing them, how are you evaluating their skill sets? Keeping in mind the fact that they might be really creative using AI to help them land the job.
That's very interesting, isn't it? We found, I would say, in the hiring funnel, and you're probably aware of this, I feel like on the job application side and sort of initial review, we're sort of in a open warfare situation where the volume of applications you get for a role and the needs to have intelligent filters on qualifications for a role of that just problem has just exploded. What we found is when you get into, real identifying real resumes and meeting real people in person, it's not that hard to figure out, who is AI driven and who's using AI support when you're answering questions, because it's very much in the human behavior and the sort of the conversation that you have. It's not a Turing test passing conversation and interview when someone's using a AI coding assistant to help you with coding questions. It's more for us been this problem around how do you manage the volume of applications and still enable fair opportunity for well-qualified candidates to make it through automated filtering.
Gotcha. And so when you're interviewing engineers, will you try to test their ability to use AI and to make them more productive?
Yes, definitely. And that for us has been a really interesting unlock. We have a very structured internal working group working on coding assistants and tooling and how to make good use of them, but also to drive some standards. The focus for us, and I think one of the tells when you speak to someone who's been using an AI coding assistant, is when they tell you how they've used it to ensure common coding patterns or to help them manage the quality of their code, rather than necessarily the particular sort of functional structure or, specific service interaction setup or something. I think there's just a huge amount of power in improving the common bar of code that's generated by humans or machine that can arise from the technology by, few shotting it and prompting it on what your patterns and standards are.
I love it. Olly, thank you so much for getting uncensored with us today. You truly have a unique background. You've been in the thick of all parts of AI for the past, 30 plus years. You have unique experience on how you're going about it. And yet you still have this great enthusiasm and energy and knowledge of continuing to innovate. Before we wrap, what's some no BS advice you have for tech leaders out there who are trying to build, scale, or even just survive in these interesting times?
Make sure everyone in your team understands your goals, their goals, that they have high observability so they can take ownership of their own metrics, whether those are quality, productivity, cost. Let them own their metrics and truly be empowered and self-determined. That's the way to have fun teams that really get great results for you.
Awesome. Olly, thanks again for coming on. Great insight shared. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin. If you enjoyed the show, go ahead and hit subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, well, we'll just share it with your competitors. Might be the edge they're looking for. Remember to fail hard, win big, and always build what matters. See you next time. That's a wrap. Another great episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. Thank you guys so much for listening. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun doing this show. I love talking with great tech leaders. As a side note, if you're interested, check out my new book, Fail Hard, Win Big. This is the story of how I built 30 companies, failed on 20, and turned 10 into multi-million-dollar wins. The common thread with all of them was custom software. Also, if you need software development help out there, my company, Sonatify Technology, we deliver world-class software development engineers out of Latin America. We have a solid track record of helping companies launch better products and faster. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it and appreciate you.